What's going on, Marvel fans? Welcome back to another breakdown review for WandaVision, taking a look at episode 7, and I gotta say right off the bat, as soon as I saw the title of this episode, it put a smile on my face, as I absolutely love when the fourth wall is messed with by characters. It's one of the main reasons I enjoy Deadpool so much, and there's plenty of it in here. But before I get any further, if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and that notifications bell so you don't ever have to worry about missing out on everything we got going on in this channel. Everything kicks off with Wanda waking up from essentially a magic hangover, and we get our first glimpse into the mockumentary format of the episode where it cuts away to a modern family-like moment of Wanda speaking directly to the camera, talking about everyone has those nights that get the better of them, and end up expanding the border of the false world they've created, where it then flashes back to a handful of sword agents being absorbed by the Hex, although shown in a much more comedic fashion than the previous episode. Then Billy and Tommy abruptly come into the room complaining about their game freaking out, where it then cuts away to showing the twins sitting downstairs playing video games, but the controllers they're using begin to warp through a couple different variations of controllers throughout the generations, ending with a hand of Uno cards. They better have been playing Super Smash Bros. When it was GameCube controllers. Tommy wonders aloud if their mom is sleeping since she's completely submersed in the blanket, but utters that she's simply resting her eyes. Oh, if I only had a nickel for every time my dad said that growing up. Billy looks for his mother's guidance as his head is awfully noisy now due to his powers like his mama's, but she ain't having it, repeating her statement of resting her eyes, and the kids awkwardly exit the room. Cut to Wanda divulging to the camera that, as punishment for her reckless behavior the evening prior, she's going to have a quarantine-style staycation for the day. 'Cause sure, that sounds like a fair discipline. Do something bad to a bunch of people and hide away in a closed-off corner like nothing happened, hoping the issue will smooth itself out. Oh, how nice it must be to bend reality to your terms. We then see Wanda throwing the blanket from off of her in bed to unexpectedly find herself still dressed in her Halloween costume. Downstairs, the boys are arguing over who gets to play their game first until Wanda comes down. Then they stop and give that look like, whoa, she's about to tear us a new one for fighting, isn't she? But she doesn't. Instead, she keeps on strolling by, visibly having a lot on her mind, and the twins shrug off the odd behavior. Wanda grabs some milk from the fridge, followed by a box of cereal from the cabinet, but when she turns around to assemble her breakfast, the milk begins warping the same way the kids' video game controllers were as it transforms from one decade's milk carton to another, and another. It's obvious to see that Wanda notices this, but she quickly dismisses it, having no desire to deal with anything, really. Wanda then tells the camera that she's not sure what that was all about, chalking it up to a case of the Mondays. Oh, Wanda, if only the issue was truly that simple. Then we get an intro with music so similar to The Office, I actually thought for a moment, did they just use the actual theme from The Office? With a twist of the visuals mirroring the style of the opening to Happy Endings. And what I thought was the nicest little touch of all was at the end of the opening it shows created by Wanda Maximoff, finally taking full responsibility for the insanity at hand here. Then we head over to a SWORD temporary retreat located 8 miles outside of Westview, giving us some indication of how far Wanda's DLC pack has expanded to, where Director Hayward and another agent discuss how lucky they feel Wanda halted the development. It's revealed the broadcast is now dead air, and Hayward says to make sure the team is ready because they're launching today. Launching what? I'll break it to you now. We don't find out in this episode. Cut to Vision regaining consciousness, or life depending on how you look at it, where he finds himself at a circus and is mistaken for being the new clown. Immediately after, he sees Darcy chained up to a vehicle and heads over to her in a stunned manner, astonished that she appears to not be familiar with who he is, as they had locked eyes and had an unspoken understanding the night before, referring to Darcy being the only one that attempted to save Vision from the garbage disposal of a whirlwind that was tearing him into pieces. But since she's a character in the WandaVision show now, she takes this as a creepy effort to pick her up and gives him a hard pass, breaking out of the chains restraining her as if they weren't even there, and walking off as Vision runs after her. Back to the Maximoff household, Wanda's enjoying her bowl of cereal and asks the boys if they've seen their dad. They haven't, and Billy asks if they can go look for him, and Wanda's reply here is a peculiar one, as she mentions that if he doesn't want to be here, there's nothing she can do about it. She grabs the remote, interrupting the boys' game, to flip on the Weather Channel, and Billy inquires about the unusual comment his Uncle Pietro made about Vision dying twice, and Wanda snaps back, firmly telling the boys not to believe a word that man said, and that he's not their uncle. So Tommy's like, who is he? And it's at this point Wanda makes her beginning of a mental breakdown evidently clear to her children when she delivers a speech about how even though they expect her, as their mother, to have all the answers, she doesn't. As a matter of fact, she doesn't have any. And to top it all off, she apparently is starting to believe that everything is meaningless. Cut to the confessional with Wanda admitting that she probably went a little dark with that one, but Vision's made of vibranium, so their kids literally inherited tough skin. I see what she did there. There's a knock at the door, and Wanda uses her magic to open it, saying hello to Agnes before she even enters the house, claiming very humorously that she'd get up to get the door, but she just doesn't want to. Agnes makes a suggestion to the kids to give their mother some time alone, and Wanda could not be happier for this offer. Billy throws in that someone has to be there to look after Wanda, but she desperately assures them that she'll be fine. So they head on off with their suspiciously always there when they need her to be neighbor, and Wanda gets back to cherishing that bowl of cereal for the briefest of moments, as suddenly several items in the house begin to do that warping thing her milk in the video game controllers did earlier. She has a momentary flash of confusion, but then uses her magic to change everything back to its original state, followed by a cutaway of her unconvincingly telling the camera that she's fine. Cut on over to Monica and Jimmy making their way to this secret connect that I've been awfully curious to discover the identity of. Undoubtedly, the most interesting theory I heard on this was people guessing it was going to be Reed Richards portrayed by John Krasinski, which, for the love of everything Marvel, please make that happen someday. His wife, Emily Blunt, as the Invisible Woman, and him as Mr. Fantastic would be, at the risk of sounding ridiculous here, fantastic. But I also had a strong feeling that even if they had already chosen to go that route, they probably wouldn't choose to reveal it through this show. On the way there, Jimmy discusses Darcy's uncovering of the Cataract files that explain Hayward was planning to turn Vision back online with the intent, Monica believes, of turning him into a weapon. Which, if that's true, holy hell does that make Hayward look like a straight up idiot given the fact that he was calling out and degrading Wanda in episode 5 for bringing Vision back against his living will, as he never wanted to be someone's weapon. Also, just want to throw in real quick that totally called this out from the last review, put one on the board for us. And then they arrive, taking us to the peak of wonder of who this mystery contact could be, and we find out it's Major Goodner? Yay! I'm sorry, but this was a real disappointment. No offense to the character or anything, but the way this was built up, although technically we're only talking about a mere couple of lines here, was hinting at the fact that we should be intrigued and potentially taken aback by the reveal of this person. But to throw in some woman that I had to go back and double check that we've literally never seen in the MCU before was like receiving a birthday present, only to find that inside the box given to you is a thoughtless, unrelatable thing that you know you'd rather return, but feel too bad to say it to the person who gifted it to you. Monica thanks her for coming, stating her mother would appreciate the loyalty, and Major Goodner goes on to unveil a Space Rover 9000 that will supposedly aid Monica in her quest to re-enter Westview. We're taken back over to the circus where Vision is continuing his efforts to get Darcy to recall the events of last night and tells her he believes she was part of a team investigating an anomaly, and now she's part of it. Once again, she takes this as a romantic advancement and submits to agreeing to go out with him. So Vision's like, alright, I've dealt with enough characters in the show to know what to do here, and unnecessarily distracts Darcy to mind zap her with his powers so she can wake up from her escape artist character, and after taking a moment to gather herself, she promptly states that although she secretly wanted to be a guest spot on the show, the brainwash experience sucked. Vision finds out her real name is Darcy Lewis, and recalls intercepting some information regarding her work. Vision says he has questions, and Darcy says she has answers. So they go to head off, but they're momentarily held up by the guy who refused to get Darcy coffee in episode 4, now playing a role in the circus, who refuses to let them leave, claiming they're up to perform. Darcy relentlessly throws a punch at the guy, knocking him down and busting his nose open, and her and Vision run off to a truck to drive to Vision's house. He asks Darcy if his children are alright, and who that imposter Pietro is. But she knows the answer to neither. And off they go. Back over to Wanda, finishing up her cereal and heading to the kitchen, when more and more items in her house begin to display this multi-decade warping effect that seems to be getting uncomfortably common. We see a table and chairs, a light fixture, some drapes, the fireplace, and the stairs all change with a visual effect similar to a TV broadcast having trouble making it all the way through. And we get another cameo from the stork that appeared in episode 3. Wanda tells the camera that she doesn't know why everything is falling apart and why she can't fix it, when a voice from behind the camera asks if she thinks that this is maybe what she deserves. Wanda's bewildered by this query and mentions to the unidentified person that they're not supposed to talk. Then get ready for another commercial accompanied by a subliminal message. I have to say that they've really knocked it out of the park with having each commercial fit the feel of each decade they're representing, and this one follows suit, as it kicks off just as any believable depression relief advertisement would, and we see a sad woman sitting on a bench with the darkened sky above her. The voice narrating introduces Nexus, an antidepressant that works to anchor you back to your reality, or the reality of your choice. choice. The outstanding side effects to this product are feeling your feelings, confronting your truth, seizing your destiny, and possibly more depression. It's recommended you should not take Nexus unless your doctor has cleared you to move on with your life. We end with the tagline, Nexus, because the world doesn't revolve around you. Or does it? Now, even though the last episode's commercial caused a whirlwind of discussion, and is continuing to do so, this one points heavily at the future of the MCU, as this product seems to be hinting at the fact that, in the comics, Wanda is known as a Nexus being. What is a Nexus being? Well, in the same way that Infinity Stones were vital facets of the universe, each Nexus being personifies a different aspect of the multiverse, and since they are sentient beings that can either wield this power for their own personal gain or for the greater good, they are debatedly more dangerous than the Infinity Stones. The craziest detail about these beings is that they connect to the nexus of all realities, meaning they can affect and alter reality in multiple planes of existence. Examples of these beings in the comics are characters like Jean Grey with the Phoenix Force, the time-traveling Kang the Conqueror, and the legendary wizard Merlin. So, what does all of this mean and what could it lead to? Essentially, this will be our direct gateway to the multiverse, a perfect transition into the events that will be taking place in the Doctor Strange sequel and the upcoming third Spider-Man film that seems to be grabbing every character from every previous Spider-Man movie it possibly can. In other words, this is a monumental step the MCU is taking, opening the doors to numerous and unique variations of characters we are familiar with having the ability to share the screen with one another. I'm aware this isn't brand new news, they've been hinting at this for some time now, but to see it actually come to fruition is a real treat. So we're then brought over to Agnes's house, where we find her relaxing on the couch with the twins and ask Billy what's on his mind. He tells her that he likes it at her house because it's quiet, emphasizing to Agnes that she's quiet, on the inside. Tommy asks her if she thinks their mom is okay. She pauses for just a moment, but reassures the boys that their mom is fine, cause she can do anything. She's super mom. And Agnes tells the camera that you try telling a 10-year-old their mother is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And then we're brought to the most questionable scene of the entire show thus far. I am not one to try and sour the milk, so to speak, and place negativity where it doesn't need to be, but when the milk is already sour, well, then you just have to call it like it is. We're brought back over to the Space Rover 9000, and Monica is getting suited up in a sword astronaut-looking outfit. Jimmy pops over to remind her that Darcy isn't here to give her stamp of approval, to which Monica heroically replies with, she knows, and she's gonna go get her out, claiming it's their last shot. But why? What is she talking about? Like, if this doesn't work, then they're just going to sit there and accept that no one can be saved and impending doom is imminent? But Jimmy's just like, Godspeed, Captain. Monica begins to enter the monster truck, and Jimmy asks Major Goodner how much faith she has in this thing, and she's like, pfft, she's about to roll right through. Sure thing, says the woman who just got here and clearly knows every detail about the hex and what it's done to literally every single object that's entered through it up to now. But nah, it's gonna be fine. Monica begins to accelerate, and I'm not kidding you when I tell you that during this part of the scene, I was legitimately yelling at my TV, what the hell makes you think this is going to work? We get a countdown to the contact and the vehicle smashes into the barrier the exact way you would expect a car to when it drives into a wall. It doesn't go through, but it does flip vertically as if we're about to drive up the wall and starts to slowly get absorbed into the hex like quicksand, where Monica must make a fast decision to get out of there. She does just in time and takes quite a fall, but gets right back up to watch the space rover get thrown out of the barrier after getting halfway through, turning the front half of it into a pickup truck. Then Monica looks at the wall, looks back at Jimmy, and says, I can get through. I'm sorry, but what? Is there some enormous clue that I'm missing here? What on earth has happened that led you to believe you can do that? Why did that thought suddenly occur to you at that exact moment instead of realizing you've already walked through once before, albeit prior to Wanda's red paint job, and then not waste the time, money, and resources on banding together a whole operation to deliver a specified advanced vehicle just so it can end up as half of a pickup truck? Cause, I'm sure they weren't using that for anything else. But whatever, she sprints towards it like there's no tomorrow and begins to push her way in. Now what follows is thankfully a very nice payoff to the ridiculousness just witnessed, as we are presented with the trippiest scene to be shown in the MCU next to Ant-Man's entering the quantum realm scene. It's a tough one to describe, but the best I can mention is it basically shows a row or line of Monicas in different outfits walking and fighting their way through as we hear a lineup of different voices throwing quotes out from different moments in her life, a good portion of which seem to be directly from Captain Marvel. The multiple Monicas end up converging into the one in the outfit we originally saw enter, and her eyes light up into a neon blue, and finishes officially breaking back into Westview. The blue in her eyes remains, and she looks around noticing she can see things a bit differently than before. Everything seems to have waves vibrating off of them, and the world is colored in a way that's slightly off, like she can see all the spectrums. Throw another one on the board for us, folks. We totally called that in the last review as well. Though I did not anticipate they would show us this quickly, this is Monica's first display of her superpowers like she has in the comics, where she's better known as Spectrum, or sometimes Photon, or even Captain Marvel in some comics. Monica drops the spacesuit and runs off to try and save the day. Picking back up with Vision and Darcy, where he seems to be clarifying something that must have just been revealed to him off screen, asking for confirmation that Wanda killed him. And Darcy admits this is the truth. But it's not as simple as that, as he asked her to do it in order to save the universe. Well, half of it. He asks if it worked, and she goes on to tell him the story of how it did until Thanos reversed time to bring Vision back, only to kill him again in front of Wanda. They get stopped at a red light, and it cuts to a confessional of Vision saying he thinks Wanda's creating the impediments to stop him from getting home. The light turns green, but they move no more than an inch before a group of city workers hop out in front of them to block their way once more. Vision's not amused, and he takes this time to proceed to verify some of the details of his past, noting that his original code dates back to an AI called Jarvis, but that his corporal form was born of Ultron's plan of global genocide. Darcy's like, yep. And then Vision asks her, what is he now? Which was a really sad and touching moment, and it's small things like that that have made Vision so much more human throughout the course of the show, and because of that, so much more relatable and vulnerable, whereas in the films, he's much more of a dominant Superman-like force who is still cool, but they've done a nice job of making us actually care about and empathize with his situation. Darcy isn't able to give much of an answer to that one, but throws out a question herself, wondering why Vision is unable to leave the Hex, and it's visibly clear he's been rocked to the core at this point. Darcy tells him that she's been watching WandaVision for the past week. No way, same here! And the love between him and Wanda is real, and that they belong together. Back in Westview, we catch up with Monica, who storms into Wanda's house. She immediately freaks out in a pretty scary way. Seriously, props to Elizabeth Olsen's acting during the scene, refusing to hear out anything that Monica has to say, and uses her magic to lift Monica up and out of the house, taking the argument outside. The neighbors and the mailman take notice and stop what they're doing, but also don't really react much to the approaching murder that seems to be on the verge of happening. Wanda accuses Monica of only telling lies and goes to slam her to the ground, only for Monica's powers to resurface once more and save her by landing in the most iconic superhero stance ever. Monica rebuttals by saying the only lies are the ones that Wanda has put in her mouth, and Wanda charges up another ball of red magic, warning Monica to be careful of what she says to her. Monica's like, do it. But Wanda can't get herself to pull the trigger, and Monica pleads and expresses to not let Hayward make her the villain. But Wanda's like, maybe I already am. Bum, bum, bum. All of a sudden, Agnes takes notice of the conversation by glancing out her window, but it quickly goes back to Monica telling Wanda she's not afraid of her, and attempts to empathize with her situation by explaining she also lost the person closest to her. And just as it seems she may be on the cusp of breaking through, Agnes pops in telling Monica to run along. Monica shouts out one last time to take the Hex down, but Wanda turns around as she walks away saying, "Don't make me hurt you." As the confrontation ends, the neighbors and the mailman and the rest of the residents proceed to carry out with their days as if nothing weird at all just went down. Cut back to Darcy and Vision's road trip, or lack thereof, where the city workers seem to have finally wrapped up with whatever project they had going on, but the literal moment they exit the screen, a class of school kids begin to walk by and hold up the duo just a bit longer. Vision tells the camera that he hadn't realized what Wanda had been through prior to the events at Westview. Well, what both of them had been through, and goes on to mention that since he doesn't remember any of it, he feels like it happened to someone else, but for Wanda, this all went down mere weeks ago. Then Vision has a moment of clarity and realizes he's doing nothing but wasting his time by talking to the camera, and he leaves Darcy behind to go after his wife. We're then brought back into Agnes's house, where she has brought Wanda in to help calm her down from that little altercation and offers up some tea. But as she goes to get it, Wanda notices some remains of a few PBJs and a kid show playing on TV, and she starts to pick up a creepy vibe as it distinctly dawns upon her that she remembers Tommy and Billy were over here earlier. Wanda questions where they are, and Agnes discloses that they must be in the basement. So of course, Wanda goes to check. She calls out to the boys, but gets no response. So she heads down the stairs and we promptly find out something ain't right about this place. It's full of roots and vines covering the walls, and Wanda is led to a room full of some interesting objects. There's a display case full of some oddly shaped bones and an orange glowing book that I believe I might have an idea of what it is. Agnes then steps out of the dark, revealing to be Agatha Harkness, who's got purple magic instead of red, and uses it on Wanda to play her a song akin to the Munsters, exposing how she secretly has been behind everything. She even killed Sparky. I'll reserve my thoughts for a moment, because then the credits come. So, episode over, right? Wrong, as this is the first episode to feature a good old Marvel mid-credit scene. We see Monica poking around Agatha's house, and opens a cellar door to the basement where her eyes instantly turn purple, showing the evident intensity of Agatha's power lurking from below, when suddenly, who pops up behind her? Pietro! I was wondering where he was the whole episode. He drops the line, Snooper's going Snoop, and then the episode really ends. So, there you have it. That's the breakdown of Breaking the Fourth Wall. Well, this one sure did leave us with a lot more questions than answers, even with that big reveal at the end. I think Agnes not being who she originally claimed to be at the beginning of the show was a bit obvious, to say the least. But even after now knowing who she is, I almost feel more confused. In the comics, Agatha is by no means considered a villain. As a matter of fact, she's most well known for being the governess of Franklin Richards, the son of Reed and Sue, and ends up going on to train Wanda. So she's much more of an aid to some of the heroes than anything else, and I'm not too eager to see them flip her into a villain. My hope is that the show is throwing us for yet another loop. I'm not fully convinced that Agatha is the big bad of the show. Maybe it's because I went so heavy on the Mephisto theory in my last review, but based on stories from the comics, I'm gonna throw a guess out there. I'm speculating that the creepy old orange glowing book in Agatha's basement has something to do with this, as it most likely appears to be the Darkhold, an ancient book full of evil spells created eons ago. Now the Darkhold has gone through multiple owners over the years, but it just so happens that one of them is Mephisto, and there's been a storyline shown before of Mephisto essentially using his powers to manipulate Agatha, which then manipulated Wanda. So with all that being said, I feel that Agatha is either being influenced by Mephisto or is currently summoning him to lure in Wanda and her twins and eventually feed off their power and make his back at full strength return to go on to bigger and badder things, with Agatha perhaps not being aware of the calamity she's brought upon everyone. But on the chance that Mephisto ends up being a no-show for this series and they do decide to make Agatha the true villain here, then I have a potential theory on what her motive is. Agatha is a witch that's been around for much longer than you may think. She saw the fall of Atlantis tens of thousands of years ago and was the founder of the coven of witches involved in the Salem witch trials. Throughout the generations, she seemed to have a central goal of rebuilding a coven by taking other magic-wielding heroes under her wing. Not necessarily with a malicious intent, but more or less to further the survival and thriving nature of their kind. So maybe, just maybe, Agatha is playing such a helping hand in all this so that she can persuade Wanda to fully submit to her teachings. In a world where she barely has anything and whatever she did have begins to slowly be pried away from her, Agatha is the only one that's truly been there to look out for Wanda at every point in turn, possibly leading her to believe that Agatha is the only one she can genuinely confide in. At least that seems to hold a bit more logic than her just being straight up evil for who knows what reason. There's just so many plot points that add up to that being one of the oddest directions to go. Why would she constantly be making an effort to play by Wanda's rules if she was indeed able to take over whenever she desired? What's the purpose of her acting like a regular brainwashed resident of Westview when it may have been more comforting for Wanda to know right off the bat that she was surrounded by others like herself? Is there a reason Agatha wanted Wanda to continue to believe all of this was real? Was it a setup to help Wanda prove to herself how powerful she really is? There's quite a few loose ends, and it's part of what makes me think we haven't had the whole truth revealed to us just yet. I've also come across some speculation that Agatha's basement might just end up being the nexus of all realities, with the roots and vines across the walls giving a similar vibe to its appearance in the comics. This could be a fascinating addition, and would help provide some explanation as to how we're seeing this version of Pietro that we are. Perhaps he really is from the X-Men universe, but Agatha has been manipulating him in his memories to play the role he has. And for the sake of the sake, let me fire out a few other important questions as we get caught up in the whirlwind of madness here. Where are Wanda's twins? Is Agatha's bunny Senior Scratch in reality her son from the comics, Nicholas Scratch? That would be nuts. How much control of everything does Wanda actually have if Agatha has been running the show? Is Agatha the cause of the hex in the first place? What kind of ridiculously awkward scenario is Vision about to walk in on when he discovers all of this? And as if that wasn't enough, this episode has further torn me between my two theories of either the break in the multiverse / nexus of all realities will introduce the mutants to this world by bringing them right on over from the most current X-Men films, or the Hex will fundamentally act as the particle accelerator of the MCU. In case you're not sure what I'm referring to, in the CW show The Flash, there is a large machine called the particle accelerator that, long story short, blows up, and the dark matter that it sends out is responsible for giving a variation of superpowers to the residents of Central City. Well, since the Hex is already proven to give one person powers due to rewriting cells on a molecular level, perhaps it has the potential to give powers to any and or all the residents of Westview, in turn, mutating their cells to somewhat justifiably call them mutants. I could honestly keep going on for a while, but I'm super curious to hear all of your thoughts. Drop your own theories and opinions in the comments below, like the video if you enjoyed this content and want to keep seeing more breakdown reviews, and I'll catch you all at the next one.